I am Heather Silvio. For the purposes of this book, I am Dr. Heather Silvio. I'll give you a little bit of background on me just so that you have the context for why I wrote the book and sort of where I come off writing the book. This is my sixth book. I've written 3 fiction, 3 nonfiction. The fiction are varied, psychological thriller, murder mystery, romantic comedy, collection of short stories in the vein of the supernatural. So all very different. My nonfiction work is based on my work as a psychologist. I have been a licensed clinical psychologist for 10 years now, I guess. I work exclusively now with combat veterans at the VA. The long title is the interim co-team lead of the PTSD treatment program. Essentially what that means is I work with combat veterans, group therapy, individual therapy, that sort of thing. And so I've written, one of my nonfiction books is on post-traumatic stress disorder. One of them is on steps to identifying and maintaining authentic happiness. And then last year, my husband suggested, I keep hearing this term, special snowflake, and people talk about it, if these people have a mental illness. Why don't you look into it? I was like, well, sure, why not? Obviously, the phrase itself is used fairly disparagingly on both sides of the political spectrum. So let me be clear, the book is not political in any way, shape, or form. But what I found when I was doing the research was that for a subset of people who act in a particular way, they do meet criteria for what would be now considered an unspecified personality disorder. So what I decided was, I'm going to specify it. So, thus, special snowflake syndrome, the unrecognized personality disorder destroying the world. Gotta have a title that brings it in, right? So what I do essentially in the book is at the beginning I lay out where the phrase comes from, because not everybody is familiar with it. And then I talk about actually what the symptoms are. So for those of you who are at all familiar with psychology or psychiatry, there is the DSM. It is the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual of Mental Health Disorders. Essentially, anything that could be wrong with you, this is where they list it. So I followed that format and actually went through and identified what I would consider 8 symptoms of having special snowflake syndrome. And then I explained exactly what that would look like, why it's different from just people who sort of want their own way. There is a specificity to it, which I'll talk about in a second. And then because essentially at my core I am a happy, positive person, the second half of the book is what do we do about it? How do we make it better? How do we learn to talk to each other a little bit more effectively? Because really that's what a lot of it comes down to. So when I talk about the symptoms, in a nutshell, if I were to give it just a sentence, it would be folks who believe they are uniquely entitled to have the world conform to their wishes, act out like children when they don't get their way, and want others to actually change their way of living to fit how they view the world. So, because I've had some people because I've had some people say, well, how is that different from, like, say, just being a narcissist, thinking I'm just all that? There really is a distinction there. With a true narcissist, they don't really care about you and just what you can do for them. For someone who, in my view, has special snowflake syndrome, they really do think they're right, and they really do think what they're doing is in the best interests of other people. So it's not a true narcissism. It really is distinct. And so so I talk in there about that, and I talk about some of the consequences if it isn't sort of checked. But like I said, it is intended to be, at its core, optimistic, and so the second half of the book really does focus on developing empathy, learning how to communicate, things like that, which are good for everybody, not just folks who might be special snowflakes. So yeah, that's my book.